Thank you, Dr. Tiemeyer and the St. Louis College of Pharmacy for having me speak here today. It's an honor to be asked. I didn't get here in the conventional way. You see, I work with my hands. I'm a woodworker. And I've also been a patient since July of 2008. And I'm a cancer survivor. And I'm a survivor of a cancer that was preventable. And that's what brings me here. This is a story I wish did not have to be told. In 2001, I had a colonoscopy. I was approaching my 50th birthday, and I was experiencing some blood. And a single polyp was removed 1 inch inside my rectum. As it was explained to me, it had cancer cells in it. In the next 7 years, no one whose care I was under ever told me I needed to be seen once a year. My wife was employed at the University of Missouri Healthcare in a position where she could and did ask the right questions about my care. She worked most days in Jefferson City, securing their funding. In response to her inquiry as to whether we should seek a second opinion, she was told, "He's in capable hands here." There had been mention of the polyp, the cancer cells, and some blood in a September 2005 visit to my primary care physician. My medical history was at her fingertips. I was examined and I was told I had a hemorrhoid and that it would take 5 to 10 years for a polyp to develop. In late 2006, I complained of blood on the paper in a routine checkup. Nothing was said, and so nothing was done. I felt assured. I did not think it was my place to question or to quibble. She was the MD, me a woodworker. Mid-August of 2007, I complained by phone of bleeding with globs like quarters. My doctor's nurse returned my call and said, "Don't worry, it's just your hemorrhoid." Time and time again, I trusted. The following July, I was diagnosed with a malignant neoplasm of the rectum and stage 4 cancer. The University of Missouri Healthcare advertises world-class care. I did not even get what I now know to be called the standard of care. It was a term I wasn't even familiar with, but I would hear a lot about it over the next year. I still remember when my home health nurse asked how this had happened, her expression when she said, "You weren't even getting the standard of care." I now know rectal bleeding should be taken seriously. Mine was ignored. What a hard lesson. A whole academic healthcare system failed, and I almost died. Because I did not speak up and ask questions, and because I finally decided to ask questions and speak up, I find myself here today. John Makepeace, a noted British furniture maker, told me when I first started out, a good and successful commission starts out with good conversation. So does the care of your health. Good conversation involves listening and paying attention. My cancer played pretty rough. It's my understanding that I had 8 times the normal dose of chemotherapy, and it was about survival. If I may quote my daughter's blog, the thought that you might die was pretty bad. I had no idea that the fight to not die would be so grisly. It was heartbreaking. It took a lot away from me, but not my spirit and not my voice. After the initial diagnosis, I told myself I wanted to deal with all of it with as much grit and integrity as possible. In the first few weeks came the tests and the scans by technicians who were polite and caring. Then I had two experiences a few days apart that sent me into a tailspin. The first was with a surgeon at the University of Missouri Healthcare, and she said I was the worst case she'd ever seen. I asked if she could help me. She said, "I don't know if I can help you or not. You're going to have to wear a bag." I was embarrassed, and at that point I wasn't certain what this was all going to be about. She said, "Do you want me to be your surgeon? I do everything from here to here." The nurse knocked at the door, came in, and asked if everyone was okay. And I left shaken, and I was pretty certain I didn't want her for my surgeon. A few days later, I met with an oncologist at Ellis Shell. This time my wife went with me. That was helpful, and it made a difference. I valued that a lot. First, we met with a resident. That conversation went well. Then an oncologist, not looking at me, he was delivering information to me faster than I could process it. He seemed very brusque. I was overwhelmed. He told me, "I'm going to resect your liver on Thursday." This was Tuesday afternoon. My wife and I both left shaken. The nurse practitioner who was part of that visit called me the next day to plan things. And I told her, "I'm not coming back." And she said, "I didn't think you would." I was discouraged, and I knew I was in over my eyeballs. I thought it would be best to just give up. My wife disagreed. So she asked for help. She spoke to a friend in Kansas City who was an internal medicine physician that she knew for many, many years, and a hospital administrator here in St. Louis who was a colleague. Within 48 hours, we were seeing someone at Siteman Cancer Center. He told me this was a reoccurrence. It was not dug out deep enough 7 years ago. If you had been my patient, I would have seen you every year. He pointed us in a different direction. He referred us to a colleague in Columbia. He said there would be light years difference. And then everything changed. My new surgeon, Dr. Walter Peters, was brilliant. He explained things well. I was told he would help me and that I wasn't the worst case he'd ever seen. He said I asked questions no patient had ever asked about the surgery, and he seemed happy to answer all of them. He gave me a drawing of what would take place. After the surgery, he told my wife his liver is fine. Shortly thereafter, we were told the pathology reports were the best we could have asked for. My oncologist, Dr. Mark Velick, my radiation oncologist, Dr. Mark Breyer, the nurses, the staff, the technicians, and the receptionist at Missouri Cancer Associates were superb. I had a lot of pretty hard days, and I didn't think there'd be any more work in wood. I was worn down, and I was confused as to why all this had to happen to me, but they were compassionate and caring. Communication was excellent, and all of our concerns and worries were addressed. Much later, I learned my creative work and my music allowed me to float above my troubles and my pain. While in the hospital for 9 days, I made a particular and interesting observation that impressed me. At shift change, the nurse leaving came to my bedside with the nurse coming on to update that person on my progress and my condition. I always tried to take that time to say thank you. I am no stranger to 12-hour workdays, but their work is not work I could do. I had months of brilliant home health nursing care from Boone Hospital, home care, Cold February days, late in the evening, still would come to tap on the door. A tap only a woodworker knows, but dedication we should all appreciate and acknowledge. Then things changed. Your healing has stalled, and you have fever. You have to go to the wound center. I really just wanted my home health nurses, but I knew I needed to do as they instructed. I saw the wound care nurse, and I told her how lousy I felt. Then came the doctor, another new face. She sat next to me on a stool. She put her hand on my arm, and she said, "We're going to help you here." The touch of the human hand and tone of voice, I assure you, can have a positive effect on the process we call healing. She explained that they would use honey made by bees in New Zealand, that it might sound silly. It had been used on burn victims during the World Wars, and they were now having success with patients who've had radiation therapy. I had wound care for 14 months. If I may go back to the blog, call it a miracle, a gift from God. I call it a hard fight won by a nose. Today, Dad is cancer-free. Our family has learned there's no such thing as false hope. Gratitude to all the remarkable and dedicated people who made me well. They were all without exception at the top of their game. A heartfelt thank you to my wife who saw me through this. When I got strong, I went and I got my medical records, and I wrote to the Vice Chancellor of Medical Sciences at the University of Missouri Healthcare, and I outlined to him all their failures. My hope was to keep this from happening to someone else, to remove the stumbling stone, as Khalil Gibran has said. 2 months later, I met with him. It was a cordial meeting, and I outlined to him just what I told you. And he told me, it's hard to pay a primary care doc $150,000 a year, and you know how it is in the building business. Shortly thereafter, I got a call from the director of the Office of Clinical Effectiveness. The role of that office is to review adverse medical outcomes. Mine never got reported. The director of that office had been my primary care physician. She had gotten promoted during my illness. She said there was a new movement in the country and they wanted to help me find peace with what had happened. I was to come to a meeting and bring a list of my losses. At that meeting, there was the Vice Chancellor of Medical Sciences, the Director of the Office of Clinical Effectiveness, and the Coordinator of Risk Management. And I presented to them a professional portfolio of all that they had asked for. And I then spoke to what my family and I had been through and what they did wrong. Then the Coordinator of Risk Management told me this was a complication. I was taken aback. I politely disagreed. Everything remained cordial. But before I left, I asked, does anyone say they're sorry? And I didn't get the answer I had hoped for. So the conversation ended. So communication as to how we deal with medical error, that failed too. 6 months later, I would learn that an entry in my medical record would show a normal colonoscopy in 2003 and in 2005. These did not occur. A thoughtful person would ask questions about ethics. Some thoughtful people already have. How do you make corrections in a climate like this? We're human and things go wrong. When a bridge falls into the Mississippi River, when a skywalk collapses at a Hyatt, and when the Space Shuttle Columbia exploded in the sky, dialogue began immediately. How we deal with error is the real measure of who we are as human beings. I have seen the finest in healthcare, and I've seen some things that are unacceptable in this industry. I wonder if we took just a little more time for the patient, and a little more time for the caregiver. Less focus on the dollar bill. My family's life would certainly be different. Change has got to come from the top. The catalyst for the change will come from the bottom. I came of age in the 60s. Prior to all this, I had a successful architectural woodworking business for 28 years. Building heirloom quality furniture was part of the business. I've never had crosswords with a customer, and I know my way around. I was taught when you see things that are not right, you do your part to help make them right. For me, up until now, that was usually done with my hands and my back. This time is different. If necessary, I would like to quote Bob Dylan, "I'm going to shake your windows and I'm going to rattle your walls." I didn't really plan to speak to this, but I've been asked, and it's not very easy. The loss of my personal privacy is now part of who I am. However, it will not define me. I want to be remembered for my workmanship, and I had hoped my best work lied ahead. I know now my most important work does. I feel I've achieved my goal of doing all this with integrity. Mentally, spiritually, and emotionally, I have done very well. It has allowed me to forgive and to harbor no hard feelings. Forgiveness beyond what I was taught. It has recently become far more difficult. Let me say why. I was asked to refer some people who could speak about my woodworking career to help assess my losses. One of these persons was a very close friend. I've known him for 30 years, and he was assistant superintendent of maintenance operations at the University of Missouri in Columbia. He told me word was sent back to him from the Vice Chancellor of Administrative Services that if he testified, he would face disciplinary action and the possible loss of his job. He was a stellar employee with 25 years of loyal service. He was our family's support during my illness. More than once, he told me he feared losing me. And on January 17th, he took his life. It will be a long time before I convince myself that this, along with other stressors in his work, did not add to his worry. For me, friendship is a two-way street. So I will always ask, did his focus on my illness keep me from recognizing his needs? What did I miss? This has been heartbreak beyond words. I know all this seems unbelievable, but I have weighed every word for accuracy and fairness, and I've left some things unsaid for a lot of reasons. The physical change, the chronic pain, and the reality of daily living I do my best with. Repeated careless mistakes I find unacceptable. And how all this has been dealt with, I find disheartening. I did not think I lived in a world where this could happen. I did not come here for sympathy. I came here to form a partnership. Let's work together to make it better. You all will work too hard to enter a healthcare system that would ever allow this to happen. Ever. It will take determination and spine. One observation I've made through all this is the keen sense my current caregivers have of the medical error that led to my diagnosis. Their goal was to get me well. They have all said they support me in what I do here today. And they have all spoken in my behalf. Sorrel King and Dr. Atul Gawande and others who have taken this issue head on will tell you the most common cause of error is a breakdown in communication. Why would we work so hard and for so long to be good at what we do and to let ourselves fail because we don't communicate effectively? It seems so senseless. It is also costly to insurance companies, to business owners, and to families. And the cost that troubles me the most is who might have done without for all that was spent to save me. And it should trouble you too. One thing I've learned from all this is medicine is more than a science. It is also an art. It's a healing art. St. Francis tells us if you work with your hands, you're a laborer. And if you work with your hands and your mind, you're a craftsman. And if you work with your hands, your mind, and your heart, you're an artist. I admire and respect your brilliant young minds, and I love and care for your generous hearts. Please don't lose your heart in your call to heal. Thank you.